Hi all, I'm Dr. Kala S.J., an Associate Professor of English and Dean of Research at Fatima College, Madurai. Now we're going to have a look at deconstruction. So here's an introduction to deconstruction. Deconstruction as a critical theory was developed by Jacques Derrida. It's a complex and multifaceted philosophical approach that challenges traditional assumptions about language, meaning, and interpretation. So, to start with, here are some of the key concepts. Deconstruction is a critique of binary oppositions. So, it critiques the hierarchical binary oppositions that structure Western thought, such as presence or absence, speech or writing. We all know that there's a common belief or an assumption that writing is secondary to speech, or rather, speech precedes writing, and that's primary. But then Derrida, he opposes that thought and he says that they are interdependent. So there is another pair also, male versus female, good versus evil. So these oppositions are believed to have privilege over the other. One term seems to have a privilege over the other. And when we say that it has a privilege over the other, we tend to, normally the assumption is that we tend to imply stability and hierarchy. But Derrida opposes that view. And what method does he adopt, or what method does he want to identify these binaries or critique these binaries? He says that these binaries are not fixed, but they are interconnected and mutually dependent. He shows how each term in a binary opposition relies on and defines itself in relation to the other. So they cannot survive on their own. Rather, they cannot be dealt with in isolation. They are related to one another. So when you deconstruct these oppositions, Derrida reveals their fluidity, ambiguity, and the ways in which they destabilize traditional categories and hierarchies. The next concept or the next principle that Jacques Derrida stresses upon or comes up with is difference. So this difference is a foundational concept in deconstruction, and it challenges the idea of two things, of fixed meaning and presence. And now, if you delve into the root of this word, you'll find that this word has its French origin, and it combines the French words differer, which means to differ. Please note the spelling there. It is D-E-F-E-R, and difference, and it's a usual one that we all know. Now, in difference, what method does he promote? Difference highlights the dual movement of deferral, that's delay or postponement, and difference. When I say difference, the distinction or how you differentiate one thing from another. And so these deferral and difference, he wants us to identify within any language and meaning. And Derrida goes on to argue that the meaning is never fully present in a text, or it cannot be determined immediately. The moment you see, you cannot come up with a meaning. But the meaning is always deferred. So what does that mean? It means that when you think of something, say for example, you think of a table. So the meaning doesn't come to you immediately. Before thinking of a table, you will think of the other furniture, saying, okay, chair. It's not chair. So that chair is the signifier. The word that you articulate is the signifier, and the physical structure that comes to your mind about a chair is the signified. So now this signifier becomes the signified. And then you start thinking about too many other words to come to the word the table. So you engage in a chain of references which causes a delay in understanding the meaning of the word that's articulated. So that's the first level. Then the next level is how a table is not a chair, so it's different from a chair. How a table is different from a teapot. How a table is different from a couch. So you try to differentiate one from the other. So two levels of acts take place. One is differing, D-E-F-E-R-I-N-G, and the R-I-N-G, and the other is distinguishing. Okay, so this concept of difference emphasizes on the instability and contingency of language. Earlier on, there was an understanding that there is a stability in language. But now, no, he stresses upon the instability and contingency of language. And therefore, what happens? The fluidity is disrupted, the stable meaning is disrupted, so everything gets deconstructed, right? Now we move on to the next concept of deconstruction, or next principle of deconstruction, that is undecidability. Now, deconstruction asserts the undecidability of meaning within text. We just saw that you cannot decide upon a meaning. And so when we say there is an undecidability of meaning within text, what are we trying to do? We are trying to challenge the notion that texts have a single fixed interpretation or truth. There's no single meaning, there's no fixed meaning, or there's no fixed truth there. So you cannot pin down to a single definitive interpretation. So there occurs something called undecidability. So now Derrida suggests a method. He argues that the text contain inherent contradictions. So there are quite a few contradictions in the text. Inherent contradictions, ambiguities. We are familiar with this word, ambiguity. And it doesn't stop with that. And because of these inherent contradictions and ambiguities, you also find multiple layers of meaning, and therefore you cannot arrive at a final interpretation. So the meaning is always open to the individuals. So it differs from one individual to another, his experiences. It differs from one reading to another. So when you have multiple readings, you have multiple meanings. So ultimately, the matter is this: you cannot completely comprehend, capture, or resolve the meaning of a text. So undecidability encourages readers to embrace the complexities and uncertainties of interpretations. So like it paves way for that, and it tells readers, okay, don't be in your comfy zone. You'll have to move out, right? So you'll have to embrace complexity. Sometimes you'll have to even come across uncertainties, and therefore you cannot look for definite answers or closures. Now the next principle of deconstruction is contextualization, wherein it emphasizes the importance of considering texts. So texts are given importance here. And when you look at text, you cannot look at text just like that. You'll have to place the text in a context, in a specific context. And what is that context? You place it within a specific historical context, a cultural context, or a linguistic context. So through contextualization, Derrida says that readers have to explore how meanings emerge out of the text because of placing the text in a context. So different meanings evolve, or multiple meanings evolve when you place the text within diverse contexts. And therefore, what happens, the text is not static, rather it's dynamic. And there is an interplay between the text and the context. Okay? So by contextualizing text, you have a broader framework of interpretation. So through that, in deconstruction, we tend to challenge simplistic or universal claims about meaning, and it encourages a more nuanced understanding of text. So you cannot just have a superficial understanding. You cannot be just satisfied with what you see there. Rather, you'll have to place that text within a context. So based on that, you will tend to understand specific culture, and you will get to know about the discursive context, and then the text. Okay, in a discursive context, the text's primary focus is to explore an idea on variety of topics, right? So the next concept, next principle of deconstruction is metaphysics of presence. Here, we try to subvert traditional metaphysical assumptions of privilege, presence, identity, and truth. Now, what's metaphysics? It's the area of philosophy that deals with the nature of existence, truth, and knowledge. And this refers to the philosophical tradition that privilege is, when we say metaphysics of presence, it refers to the philosophical tradition that privileges immediacy, direct access to meaning, and the presence of a stable, self-sufficient reality. And so, through metaphysics of presence, the method that we adopt is critiquing the tendency to prioritize immediate presence over absence, identity over difference, and truth over ambiguity. So by destabilizing these metaphysical hierarchies, deconstruction invites critical reflection on how meanings are constructed. So meanings are just not placed on a platter before you. Meanings are constructed, and how they are contested within philosophical and cultural discourses, thereby challenging the ideas of a fixed, stable reality, and it emphasizes the fluid, contingent nature of language and meaning. So he makes it very clear that meaning is not something that is static, it's dynamic, there's fluidity in it, and that it keeps changing quite often. The next principle of deconstruction is play of language, where it explores the playful and performative aspects of language, highlighting its ability to generate multiple meanings and interpretations. So when we look upon certain things, because they are interrelated, sometimes you might feel that the ideas are repeated. So here Derrida argues that language operates through a play of differences, as we saw earlier, difference. Okay, so we tend to distinguish where meanings are produced and contested through a network of linguistic signs and references. Right? So now, this play of language disrupts fixed meanings and opens up new possibilities for interpretation, encourages readers to engage actively with text. So the whole focus is on the text. Why? Because you need to question the assumptions about language and meaning, and you need to recognize the creative and unpredictable nature of linguistic signification. So we had been looking at the principles and methods of deconstruction, and we have understood that it challenges conventional understandings of language, meaning, and interpretation. It invites readers and scholars to engage critically with texts. It prods people to recognize the complexities and contingencies of meaning-making processes, and it paves way to embrace the openness and plurality of interpretation. So it's not restricted to one interpretation. There is a plurality of interpretations. Now is the era of plurality too, that characterize human understanding. So therefore, we see that deconstruction remains a powerful and influential approach within philosophy, literary theory, and cultural studies, thereby prompting ongoing debates and innovations in how we understand and interpret texts and discourses. So now we're going to look at the influence of this deconstruction on three different arenas, basically the philosophy, literary theory, cultural studies, and beyond. So take the literary theory, you find that deconstruction has revolutionized approaches to reading and interpreting texts. How? By challenging traditional notions of authorial intent and fixed meanings within texts. It encourages readers to explore the multiple layers of meaning, ambiguity, and contradictions present in literary works. This approach has enriched literary analysis by fostering a more nuanced understanding of how texts operate and the complexities of language and representation. So now we move on to the influence to look at how deconstruction has influenced philosophy. It has reshaped debates about language, meaning, and truth. How? By critiquing binary oppositions and the metaphysics of presence. So Derrida's philosophy has prompted profound reflections on the nature of knowledge and reality. Deconstruction invites philosophers to reconsider foundational assumptions and to recognize the inherent fluidity and contingency of concepts and ideas. So now let's look at how deconstruction has influenced cultural studies. It has paved way and has enabled scholars to analyze and critique cultural texts and practices. It encourages an examination of power dynamics, identities, and discursive formations within cultural artifacts. It has been an instrument in highlighting marginalized voices that were muffled so far. How? By challenging hegemonic narratives, by fostering a more inclusive understanding of cultural production and representations. And its influence on language and linguistics. Deconstruction has been a great source of influence on linguistic theory by questioning the structuralist emphasis on binary oppositions and stable linguistic categories. It underscores the play of language and the ways in which meanings are constructed through differences and difference, and has influenced linguistic studies by promoting a more dynamic and context-sensitive approach to language analytics. It has also influenced the field of ethics and politics by addressing issues of justice, encouraging critical reflection on power relations, identity politics, and the ethical implications of language and representation. It has inspired discussions on hospitality, alterity meaning to say the other, focus on the other, and the ethical obligations towards others in a globalized world. We find that it also has an interdisciplinary impact. It has fostered dialogue across various fields, from literature to law, architecture to psychology, and it has emphasized on questioning assumptions by exploring complexities and engaging with ambiguity, and by doing so, it has prompted innovative approaches to research and scholarship. Thus, deconstruction continues to inspire new avenues of inquiry and theoretical frameworks in diverse disciplines. Now, we move on to look at the merits of deconstruction And when we look at the merits of deconstruction, some of them may be some of the merits may be repetitive, what we have seen before. So now, um, it is a critical engagement. So the merit is, it's a critical engagement that encourages a rigorous and critical engagement with texts, ideas, and assumptions, and prompts readers and scholars to question fixed meanings, hierarchies, and binary oppositions within philosophical and cultural discourses. It helps in uncovering marginalized perspectives, and therefore it emphasizes on the importance of recognizing and amplifying marginalized voices and perspectives within texts and cultural narratives. It has an interdisciplinary influence, as we have seen earlier, and thus it has fostered cross-disciplinary dialogues and innovations across varied fields such as literature, philosophy, cultural studies, language, ethics, and politics. So, deconstruction challenges metaphysical assumptions, binary oppositions, and hierarchical structures within language, not just language, but also thought. Okay, now we move on to see or look at the demerits of it. Critics and scholars believe that deconstruction's reliance on complex theoretical concepts such as difference, trace, undecidability can make it challenging for readers and scholars to grasp and apply them effectively to any particular field. And therefore, they also feel that the impact may be dense and it may be abstract in nature, and thereby it might limit accessibility and practical applications, particularly outside academic settings. The next demerit is critics argue that deconstruction's emphasis on undecidability and the multiplicity of meanings can lead to relativism. What's relativism? It's a philosophical position that points of view have no absolute truth or validity, but rather are relative to the perspectives or context from which they arise. Say, for example, a funeral in one context, social context, may be a mourning occasion where it is very sad. In yet another place, it might be a rejoicing one. So it all depends upon the context. And therefore, relativism asserts that different cultures, societies, or individuals may have different beliefs and values, and that no single viewpoint is universally valid. There are several forms of relativism, including moral, cultural, and cognitive relativism. Okay, so critics feel that the multiplicity of meanings can lead to relativism and the denial of objective truth or meaning. And they feel that deconstruction may undermine the possibility of achieving meaningful consensus or clarity in interpretation, and therefore it might pose challenges for constructive dialogue and shared understanding. Next is the critique of practicality. Some critics contend that deconstruction's focus on textual analysis and theoretical abstraction may detract from addressing practical, social, political, and ethical issues. It might question the relevance of deconstruction or rather in addressing urgent real-world challenges, and may limit its perceived impact outside academic discourse. Now, there is also a critique of the methodological clarity. Critics argue that deconstruction lacks clear methodological guidelines and criteria for evaluating interpretations, leading to subjective and arbitrary readings. And this critique challenges the reliability and consistency of deconstructive analysis. And due to that, it raises concerns about its reliability as a methodological approach. And still, deconstruction faces criticisms regarding its accessibility, theoretical abstraction, and potential implications for relativism. Despite being debated and critiqued, deconstruction remains a vibrant and influential theoretical approach that continues to shape intellectual debates and inquiries into the nature of language, knowledge, and culture. Therefore, deconstruction's influence lies in its challenge to conventional modes of thinking and interpretation, encourages scholars and readers to engage critically with texts and discourses to uncover hidden assumptions and power dynamics, to embrace the plurality and complexity of meanings. So, thank you so much for your patient watching. I hope this was useful. Thank you.